Joining us in the studio is John Herron, the father of Courtney Herron, who was murdered at Royal Park in May of 2019. John, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you, George.
The reason we have you back in the studio is because I believe a law that was being contemplated has suddenly been put to one side. There were gag orders that were proposed if we were going to talk about any case, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be sexual violence, that we would not be able to mention the name of the perpetrator.
That's correct.
Now I find that extraordinary. It seems to me that if your family's been the victim of something like this, the last thing you'd want would be to be told, shut up, don't say anything.
That's right.
I can't believe that we've got to this stage and you've had to step up, as have others, to say to not only to the police but to the judicial system, this is not on.
That's right. So it really was up to the stage where I issued joint statements with Jill Maher's family and Asawa's family, and the government stood up and paid attention to that.
So these are three families that have had the most horrendous outcomes.
That's right.
Oh.
And we all sort of said collectively that if the gag orders were in place, and personally I'd speak up myself regardless of any consequences. So the judiciary could throw the book at me because I've lost my daughter, I've got nothing else left to lose.
Correct. And as you've touched on a number of occasions when you and I first spoke about this, the damage wasn't just losing your daughter, it was the way it was done, by whom, and the fact that as the case opened up and you proceeded in court, you kept finding out layers of problems within this young man's life that should have been addressed years before, but were never touched on. This man, we know now, has had priors, should never have been on bail, should never have been out of jail, and would never have met your daughter, and you would still be the father of Courtney Herron.
That's right. So Henry Hammond, the killer, the police, since we last had an interview in August, have had an epiphany and revealed information about his background. So I saw his priors. So he had offences, I believe, in Queensland. He had offences against women in New South Wales and the attempted murder of a woman here in Melbourne. Now, we go from that attempted murder, from what I've seen, to him being released. He was released into a 10-month sentence, which was very light indeed for that crime. He was released after 5 months, 4.5 months early, and he killed Courtney after being only out for 5 weeks. So the matter how Judge Carmody released him is incredible, but not isolated. So he was able to be granted bail. The charges were watered down all the way down to threat to kill. So when the police showed me what he was charged for, I knew there was more behind that. So he was charged with intentionally causing injury, resisting arrest, that was it. But behind that I said there must have been other charges, and they said yes. So he started out with attempted murder, recklessly causing injury. If in the law, in criminal law, the word reckless means a 2-year sentence. So in any normal circumstance he should
have been behind bars.
Now, still behind bars.
Yeah, well, he's not behind bars. He was judged as mentally impaired and not fit to go to jail. That's again another bar that you've had to deal with.
That's right. So but that's a very common thing, and particularly in that space of attacks on women at the violent end here, that he can have all these charges whittled down bit by bit. So certainly the fact is he had expensive lawyers, which is an interesting thing the police told me. One of the first things when he was picked up at the Salvation Army in Bourke Street, he asked by name for an expensive lawyer, who obviously he'd used in previous cases.
So clearly he could think clearly enough to identify a legal professional who could get him out of a jam ASAP.
That's right.
That's interesting. And yet he was impaired to the extent that we couldn't put him in jail.
No,
for the murder.
In that process, you have Office of Public Prosecution, the prosecutor, didn't oppose or raise the issue about his violent crime, how he was released early against the previous woman, nor did the judge.
Do we know why? Did they have no stomach for it, or is there a case precedents that have said to them, don't go down that road?
The normal precedent in family violence and particularly violent crimes against women is that the prosecution usually doesn't back down police prosecutors. In this case, the police prosecutors in the magistrates court, what normally in another state would have been an 8-year sentence was a 10-month sentence. We've got that. And then we've got a county court judge releasing him because he seemed to be enamoured because the parents flew down from Sydney. That's what I can read in the transcripts.
But where do we sit now with the gag orders? What's next? What are you doing to make sure that they are rescinded, not suspended?
So with the Let Us Speak movement, led by Nina Fennell.
Let us speak.
Yes, let us speak or let her speak. It can be deemed both. They were literally postponed because they were defeated in the upper house in October last year. So they'll be debated again. The government's going through a consultation with victims' families, and I've actually been through that, and they were seemed to be very open to listen to what the victims said.
That would have been a major setback for the government, losing in the upper house.
Well, that's a political issue for them, but for victims, what we're after is recognition.
Recognition and justice.
It's the ability for victims to speak out. So one of the things that's very common in victims, and when you talk to others, because victim support in Victoria is frankly a shambles. The only thing with victim support is other victims supporting each other.
Why is it in such poor shape?
My experience in it and talking to all the others. So the government might push you back to having call this 1-800 number that doesn't answer between, only answering it, say, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, doesn't answer, doesn't provide effective services. It's a common thing across the board. So when the government says call 1-800 Safe Steps, respect lines, men's...
Only through business hours?
Yes and no, but the facilities and services are offered. It's not always the case, but you've got no coordinated approach in that space, really. So, frankly, it's a shambles.
So what would you like to see done?
It needs to be properly coordinated and managed, whether that's a separate government agency within the victim support area. The Justice Party has proposed, and I think it's got legs within Parliament, with the Attorney General possibly, to have a large fund for to provide victim assistance, including legal, through the process when you're a victim of crime. So there is victims of crime tribunals. That's good.
Does the government have the appetite for this?
I believe so.
Okay.
From what I've heard, and in my consultation with the government, though,
the opposition parties supporting?
Oh, yes.
Good. That's very good.
So because one of the in the victim support area, the Victims of Crime Tribunal I think works really well, and there is counselling available. Very good. But that's run by private legal firms too. So that's not unimportant. But how to navigate a victim through all the trauma that they experience, and especially how they navigate the legal system, is something that's a complete void. And so that, I think, as an initiative is a good sign.
I was just going to say, you're saying this, and you're a professional. You've been in the system, and you understand as a lawyer the trials and the pitfalls and the many challenges that the system throws up. And for you to be saying we need a lot more to be done is quite simply a huge indictment on the current state of affairs. And the DPP, how does it see things at the moment? Is it in being aggressive and progressive, or is it sitting back and thinking to itself, this might be in the too hard basket?
If you put me on the spot, I'd say the latter. And if you want to see their performance in things like the Pell trial, which is probably akin to Monty Python, so I don't see any activity from there. And if you look at them, how they defended the gag laws initially, so they were in support of that, although they said that correctly. They could have prosecuted people in the past but didn't do so. But as a victim, and you think, well, am I happy with that body being benevolent? And the answer is a flat no.
Much work to be done. John Herron joining us in the studio on The Informer to give us an insight, a little bit more behind the scenes about something that really needs to be attended to, and the sooner the better. Thank you, John.
Thank you.